Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our webcast, How Understanding Personality Can Benefit Your Business. My name is Paul Wilson. I work as a lead consultant at OPP. The key part of my role is training customers to use our tools inside their organizations. Today I'm joined by my colleague Ben.
Hello, I'm Ben Vanatza. I work as a senior consultant at OPP. I'm an occupational psychologist and I support clients in the assessment and development of their people.
Great, thank you, Ben. So you'll hear a bit more from Ben in a moment, but first of all, let me give you a bit of background on who we are and what we do. So we are one of Europe's leading occupational psychology consultancies. We're based in Oxford, but we work globally and we have regional offices across Europe. So we distribute a portfolio of psychometrics and tools, the most popular being the MBTI, which we're going to talk through in greater depth later on. We help organizations in a number of areas, including designing and delivering selection processes and supporting individual, team and leadership development. So our webcast today will look at how understanding personality can benefit your business using the lens of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is commonly known as the MBTI. So this session is for anyone who's new to personality frameworks and wants to know how they work, those new to the MBTI in particular, or anyone who would like a refresher. We will begin by looking at the value of understanding personality and the impact that this can have in the work context. We will then introduce the most popular and widely used personality framework, which is the MBTI, and how it works. And following on from that, we'll then turn our attention to how it can be used by providing some practical examples. First of all, we're going to look at how it can be used with teams as part of their development, and then we'll move on to how it can be used within leadership development. So this webcast will last for 25 minutes, with 5 minutes for questions at the end, so 30 minutes in total. And as you'll see, there is a question for you to answer, just to get you thinking about how aware you think people are within your organization about personality. So it would be great if you could please take a moment just to respond to that question, and we shall review this shortly. Okay. Now I'll pass over to Ben, who's going to talk a little bit more about the value of personality.
Thanks, Paul. So before we consider the value of personality, it would be useful to understand what this word means, as it has many common uses and definitions. And here we have two definitions. So one from the Oxford English Dictionary, which is the combination of characteristics or qualities that form an individual's distinctive character. So it sounds a little vague. The one that we have from the Encyclopedia of Psychology provides us with a little bit more to go on, and it makes the connection to how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. But personality is even broader than this, and it also encompasses our interests, our attitudes, values, and temperament. So it is essentially all that defines who you are. And one way we may start to make inferences about our personality would be to seek to understand our behavior. However, it is important to make the distinction between personality and behavior. So personality represents what we are, whereas our behaviors concern what we do. Our personality is also stable and enduring, whereas behaviors can be very short-lived or habitual. Many researchers would argue that it's hard to change our personality, whereas we can and do change our behavior depending upon the situation. And personality is not always visible to us, whereas our behaviors are observable and measurable. So in order to get a more complete picture of an individual's personality, we have to go deeper than just simply reading their behavior. So what is the value of understanding personality at work? Well, it's hard to think of many issues where an appreciation of our respective personalities would not be relevant. And here we have some of the common people challenges experienced within the workplace that we often hear our clients talking to us about. So a team is not working together effectively. Leadership may be focused in the wrong areas. There may be direct or covert conflict, and even the absence of conflict may mean that people are not comfortable to share their concerns. Communication breakdowns are often at the heart of a lot of issues, and people may show different responses to change or cope with stress in different ways. Now, for all of these kinds of issues, helping people to understand more about their own as well as others' personalities can be that vital first step to be able to acknowledge differences and to be able to work through these challenges. However, I would argue that we are not all operating from the same level of personality awareness. And what we can see here are the different levels of awareness described. Towards the bottom, this is where we are largely oblivious to personality differences, or we may trivialize these. As we start to move about halfway up, we are starting to acknowledge and accept personality differences. The next step will be to value and adapt to perceived personality differences. Finally, when we are integrating these into our style, we're consciously incorporating these into what we do, making the most of these differences and proactively searching for gems that may come from different perspectives. So it'll be interesting at this point to see how you would describe the level of personality awareness within your own organizations.
Okay, so if we look at the poll, I guess, Ben, the good news is that no one in our audience today reckons that mostly people ignore personality differences inside their organizations. But the most popular answer is our middle one, acknowledge and accept personal differences, with 50% of people picking that option.
Great, thanks, Paul. Now, sometimes we may have our own internal or implicit models of personality. I've once heard that Ronald Reagan said that you could tell a lot about a man by the way in which they ate a jelly bean. And I would not certainly advocate this as a technique. I'm not sure that it would add a great deal of value. And the problem with relying upon these models is that they're not open to be scrutinized or challenged. It's much more useful to rely upon established frameworks that describe personality differences. And in doing so, this can help us to progress through these different levels of awareness more quickly. And at this point, I'll hand you over to Paul, who can now take you through an overview of one such framework, the MBTI.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ben. So the MBTI is a great example for us to explore in this webcast because it's the most widely used personality framework in the world. So I'll start off just by giving you a bit of an overview of where the tool has come from. So the model was first developed by Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychologist, and he was one of the founding fathers of this particular field of psychology, and developed a model looking at personality differences. The MBTI questionnaire itself was developed by Catherine Briggs and Isabel Myers, who were a mother-daughter team working in the United States. And they were really fascinated with Jung's work and wanted to bring it to a wider audience. Now, they were working at the time of World War II, when obviously there's a lot of conflict in the world, and they thought that the framework could really help individuals resolve differences with each other, but also help understand themselves better. And that was particularly important because this was a time when particularly women were entering the workforce en masse. It's all about helping people to find jobs they'd find rewarding. So it's very much a strengths-based tool that looks at differences positively. And a key part of the philosophy of this tool is that there is no ideal preference or type to be. They each have different associated strengths or blind spots. And for me, this makes it really extremely powerful, but also extremely safe for understanding differences when working with teams. Since its publication, the tool has been continuously and regularly updated and researched, and there's over 12,000 independent articles supporting its application. So the tool has been researched and validated for use in over 27 different languages across the world, and it's in part to this kind of global relevance and depth of supporting research that has made it so widely used, with 79% of the FTSE 100 having a qualified practitioner in-house. Another part of the tool's success is that individuals and teams in all sectors and across all organizational levels benefit from the learnings from the framework. So the tool focuses on the concept of preference, and I'd like to give you a bit of an insight into what we mean by preference and ask you all to participate in a quick exercise. So if you have a pen and a bit of paper to hand, I'd like you to grab it. And firstly, I'm going to ask you just to sign your name. Now, secondly, I'd like you to put the pen in your other hand and to give it a go again. Okay, once you've done that, I'd like you to reflect upon how you found the differences between the two. Now, what we find is typically people describe signing a name the first time as being natural, instinctive, and it doesn't really take any thought at all. We essentially say that this is your preference or your preferred way of being. The second time, it takes much more effort, energy, and actually often really takes a long time just to work out how to hold the pen and then the action of putting pen to paper. And whilst I guess a key point to emphasize is that it's possible for everyone to do both, and with practice you may get really good at doing both, you will always have one that is more natural and more comfortable for you to do, and will be what you do instinctively. So when we're identifying type, we are trying to understand the core of your personality and what drives your behavior. So the framework looks at 4 key dimensions of personality, with the theory being for each of these areas that for the two styles, you're going to use both every day, but one will be your preference. So the first pair, extroversion, introversion, is all about how you're energized and where your energy comes from. Sensing and intuition is all about what kind of information you prefer to use. Thinking and feeling is all about how you make decisions. And judging and perceiving is all about how you deal with the world around you. So again, remember, we use all 8 of these, so you're going to feel familiar with them all. But by understanding these 8 styles, we have a simple yet powerful framework for understanding the things that we may do instinctively without thinking about it. And also to understand similarities and differences with others. So the purpose of the MBTI is to help develop our own self-awareness and to help us understand our preferences. It provides a common language to start talking about personality differences positively. We often assume that everyone else takes in information and makes decisions the exact same way as us. And as a result, what I often see is that people struggle to understand why someone else with the same training and the same role in the same team still approaches things very differently. So often people really have those big light bulb moments when they can suddenly appreciate why they may have been struggling with someone with a very different approach to their own. Okay, so to give you greater insight into these preference pairs, I'm going to talk through a quick overview of the pairs, with each of them represented by a letter. So those who prefer extroversion naturally focus on and draw energy from the world around them, as represented by a solar-powered robot, finding that interacting with that external world gives them energy. Introversion draw energy from within, so naturally focus on their internal world of thoughts and ideas, so need time to themselves to top up their energy levels. Those who prefer sensing trust information that's practical and tangible. They'll zoom into the detail of how things really work, whilst those who prefer intuition, represented by the N, focus on what could be, so zoom out for the bigger picture. Those who prefer thinking naturally focus on being logical and are task-focused. They step out of the decision to objectively analyze pros and cons, whilst those who prefer feeling naturally focus on harmony of values. They step into the decision to focus on the impact of people. Finally, those who prefer judging work best in a structured, planned manner. They want to reach closure. Those who prefer perceiving work best in an emergent and adaptable manner. They want to keep their options open. Now, when we take a preference from each of those 4 areas, you come up with a 4-letter overall type. And this can provide a really great amount of information about how you approach tasks and how you interact with others. It's important to emphasize when we look at whole type, each of the preferences will interact with each other. So in this model, the whole really is greater than the sum of the parts. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a quick insights into the tool, and I'll pass back over to Ben, who'll talk through a couple of examples of how this framework has really made a difference.
Thanks, Paul. So the MBTI can be used to support a wide range of individual and group-based activities, and we won't have time to look at all of these. Instead, we'll focus on a couple of its common applications, supporting team development and leadership development. We'll begin by looking at teams. Teams at different stages, whether newly formed or established teams, looking to optimize their effectiveness, can benefit from developing greater awareness of themselves and one another. One of the real benefits of using the MBTI for this purpose is that it provides this common language and a framework to start talking about personality and to recognize similarities and differences. This helps people to really consider the impact of their behaviors on others. The MBTI should always be positioned as an indicator. It is not used to judge or categorize people. It is simply a guide to achieving greater awareness. We find that it provides a shortcut to being able to surface issues and discuss differences. And by developing an understanding of the preferences within the team, this helps accelerate the team towards high performance when they may not have the resources to do this naturally themselves. It is a deceptively simple tool, yet there is a lot of hidden depth to it. So it can also be used as a foundation to support the ongoing team development journey. And I would always emphasize that being able to maximize team performance takes time and effort. It's not going to be solved by a one-off event. Of course, human behavior and relationships are more complicated than this. But rather, the identification of type is only the first step in a process of enhancing strengths, identifying blind spots, and agreeing actions to improve team performance. And the MBTI can be used to address a number of common challenges. So here we can see the range of applications the MBTI covers. And This tool does not just outline what may be expected from our behavior, but it provides an explanation for why we do different things. So it helps us to really understand what is happening beneath the surface. And as a practitioner, you have the reassurance that there are lots of resources to support you, depending upon where the team might need to go in the future. So it's possible to weave the insights from the MBTI into different challenges that the team may be facing, such as looking at decision-making, communication, conflict, change, and resilience. There is always something you can come back to. Now, what we can see here is a type table, and it's an example of one of the outputs that would come out from an MBTI team event. This data is actually taken from a session that I ran with a team recently. So this was for a management team based in a manufacturing plant. And as part of the session, we looked at the balance of preferences within the team. And as you can see here, everyone fell into one column. So they all shared the same middle two preferences with one another. So this involves taking in information using sensing, so focusing on facts, the reality, and the here and now, and making decisions using thinking, which involves looking at logic and objectivity. The more similarity there is between types, the sooner the team will come to understand each other, and they are likely to make their decisions more quickly. However, they may make more errors, as they may often overlook other preferences. This was just one of the insights to come out from the session, but it was a real revelation for the team, as it helped them to understand how they may have a shortcut when reaching decisions, and will often neglect the contribution of the underrepresented preferences. So intuition, which is about bringing in more novel ideas or thinking more broadly, and feeling, so considering the impact on people and taking a more person-centered approach. This really resonated with the team, as they found that they worked well under a crisis situation, but sometimes struggled to land the more complex, longer-term people projects. Now, some people may believe that there is something wrong with their team if it's not composed of the ideal mix of types. And in my experience, there's no such thing as an ideal team. And the MBTI should not be used as a recruiting tool to identify someone with the ideal type to plug a gap. But rather, this helps to raise a shared awareness within the team of how they can really harness their strengths, what to watch out for, and to understand how they can work together more effectively going forwards. The final area we will be considering is how the MBTI can be used within leadership development. And the MBTI is one of the most popular psychological instruments used in coaching and leadership. Going through an MBTI assessment can help provide leaders at all career stages with insights into how they think, make decisions, and interact with others. It is a tool that can help leaders identify ways to harness their natural preferences, to make the most of their strengths, and become aware of their potential blind spots. Type also endorses that there isn't one right way to lead, and it helps people to understand how to lead authentically, whilst also enabling them to flex their style by being able to use their opposite preferences to suit the needs of different individuals or the situation. And this can lead to greater communication and influence with their teams and across the business. And as we've seen before, the MBTI can be used as a foundation to address many common challenges. So there are many ways it can be applied within the context of leadership development. Okay, so I can now take you through a case study to highlight how it can be used to support leadership development. The client organization was Celicio, and they are based in the pharmaceutical and healthcare sector. They operate globally, and their brands include AAH Pharmaceuticals and Lloyd's Pharmacy. We were approached by Celicio to support the leadership development of the Lloyd's Pharmacy area manager population. And these individuals would have responsibility for between 20 to 30 pharmacies within a region. The organization had gone through an extended period of change, and following a review to find out what support the area managers needed, we designed a comprehensive leadership development program to support their area managers to understand more about their preferences and the impact on others, to recognize their own and others' emotions during change, to enable them to deal with conflict in a positive way, and how to empathize with others to get the most out of conversations. The first stage of this program involved a fundamentals workshop. This was aimed at supporting participants in understanding their personality differences. This involved the area managers going through an MBTI group feedback process together in their regional teams. So this will not only be useful for them individually, but it would also help them to better understand their fellow team members. The exercises and reflection activities focused upon their particular business context, so participants were required to consider the implications of their preferences when involved in one-to-one meetings, whilst preparing an agenda, or allocating tasks to others. They also had the opportunity to practice flexing their type to the needs of others. So one of the exercises involved them selling a change initiative to an audience who would have their opposite preferences. Throughout, there was a clear link to action planning in order to build a commitment to behavioral change. Following on from the fundamentals workshop, there was then a developing leaders workshop which focused on raising awareness of their leadership style, enabling them to have different types of conversations with their teams, as well as equipping them to better handle conflict and adapt their behaviors to the situation they were facing. And here is an example of one of the exercises used, which was exploring what works for you when it comes to being recognized or appreciated at work. So on the first question, a common difference played out. Some people wanted to be recognized for what they have done, being good at what they do, whereas others wanted to be appreciated for how they've gone about doing things and their contribution. In terms of how you like to be appreciated or recognized, some people wanted this to come from someone they respected. So, for example, it could be their manager, superiors, or a subject matter expert. And they wanted this to be recognition which would be more tangible as well. So it could be a bonus, having a salary increase, or being awarded more responsibility. For others, this could come from anyone they've impacted on, their manager, colleagues, customers, or end users. Things like bonuses may also be important, but they were not the top priority. It would be to receive personal thanks or a token of appreciation. Finally, in terms of when, for some it was only at the end or after clear milestones, once they've had an opportunity to demonstrate their competence and finish a piece of work. For others, they wanted to receive appreciation at regular checkpoints or throughout the project. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the MBTI, you may have already worked out which preferences this relates to. So on the left, this was characteristic of those with a thinking preference, and on the right, those with a feeling preference. This type of exercise helps leaders to understand that what works for them in terms of recognition or appreciation may not work for others. And if we seek to motivate others in a way that does not match their own preference, we may unintentionally be demotivating them. It may come as no surprise that this is one of the preferences that has the greatest impact on conflict within the workplace. Now, to evaluate the project, we gathered data from all participants during and after the program to understand reaction and learning impact. And as we can see, the program was very well received, with all participants reporting that they had made changes to their behavior as a result of the program. Most area managers felt more resilient in the face of change, were more confident to help others through change, and had a greater awareness of how to flex and adapt their behavior. And for a quarter of the participants, we also contacted them by phone to have more in-depth interviews. And this provided us with an understanding of the impact of their behavior on performance. And here is just a selection of some of the comments that came out from these interviews. So I'll just give you a moment to read these. So participants commonly mentioned how the program had raised self-awareness, allowing them to observe their own behavior and become more conscious or deliberate in their communication. Area managers reported listening more before speaking, really giving thought to the messages that they were trying to convey, leading to improved day-to-day interactions both within their own and across other teams. So this brings us to the end of this session. Hopefully it has been useful to see the value of understanding personality and how the MBTI can be used to support this. Whilst we take a brief pause before we take any questions, I'll just leave you with some quotes from other clients who have found it useful to use the MBTI within their business.
Great, thank you very much, Ben. So we'll just give you a moment to have a read of those, and if anyone would like to, please do feel free to send some questions. We've already received some already, actually, so I will start off with those. So I think a question for you, first of all, Ben. So, Ben, how can MBTI, you mentioned stress at the start of the session, how can MBTI help with stress?
Okay, thanks, Paul. So the MBTI it can be used as a way of understanding what may be happening to us when we succumb to stress. And so it helps us to understand what is happening at a deeper psychological level, as well as how this may manifest itself in terms of our behavior. So that can be beneficial for people to then understand what may be going on at different stages of stress. So as they start to experience more work pressure, and at the point at which they start to really have that meltdown moment. So it enables people to recognize when they actually may be starting to show signs of stress, so that they can try to nip that in the bud and focus on some strategies to overcome stress. It helps us to understand what may be in particular stressing us out. So there may be different stressors which apply to different preferences. And it can help us to understand what may energize us as well. So if you are interested in finding out more about stress, then there is actually a webcast on our website. So John Haxton, our head of thought leadership, explains much more about how what happens as we go through the different stages of the stress cycle.
Excellent, thank you. I really find type and stress a really interesting area because, as you were saying, I think particularly being aware of the triggers for stress and noticing how you respond to it can be huge factors in helping to recover from stress as well. So a couple more questions come in. So we've got one which is saying, what do you need to do to be able to use the MBTI? So you can come on, we have a number of different ways you can get trained in the tool. Most common way of using it is the MBTI Foundation Qualification course. And in the attachments and links section of our website, it will take you to our MBTI page at opp.com, and you'll be able to find the training from there. That's if you wanted to become qualified as a practitioner yourself. If you would like our consultancy department to come in and work with you, then again, that's something you can do without having to be qualified, and that's again something you can contact us about through our website. Okay, another question, Ben, that we've got is it possible to use the MBTI in selection?
Okay, well, this is often a question that we may get asked, and there is a fundamental point around the MBTI, which is that it looks at our preferences and just what we may find natural or comfortable in terms of our characteristics. However, it doesn't say anything at all about our ability or our competence, so we should never use it to make decisions about people. It was not designed to be used for selection, and just because we may have a preference towards certain ways of working, that doesn't mean to say that we cannot become very effective at also demonstrating our opposite preferences. So definitely not used for selection. If you are interested in selection and want to harness the insights from personality, there are what we call trait-based questionnaires, things like the OPQ32, 16PF, or CPI 260, which are designed to be used for that purpose.
Thank you. And if you are interested in knowing more about the CPI 260, again, you can find out information about that on our website under the Other Tools section. Okay, so we've received a question, are we going to share the presentation slides? Unfortunately, we're not going to share the slides as such, but you will be able to view the webcast again in the webcast section of our website. So if you joined us halfway through and you'd like to see the start of it, you can do that. You can also view the Celestio and all of our other case studies under the case studies section of the website.